BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Alright, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. Just a couple of quick announcements before we begin. The first is that this show has 3 main episodes that come out on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And Friday isn't anything goes, where any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, and the Zodiac Killer. And it's going to be just that this week, a Zodiac Anything Goes Friday, where I will be discussing the book The Hunt for Zodiac by Mike Rodelli. And last week on the Zodiac Killer News Report, a lot of you guys were leaving some excellent questions and comments about Mike Rodelli's research and his suspect, Shel Cavale, and the process that he went through to obtain all the information. And that stuff will be available this Friday on the Anything Goes segment. Recently, I had been doing a series of videos on Stephen Avery, who was the subject of the Netflix docuseries Making a Murderer, which explores what happened to Teresa Halbach. She is the victim in the murder story that has been associated with that Netflix series. And it's presented in somewhat of an engaging way, just trying to figure out who actually committed the murder of Teresa Halbach. And there is a playlist that has been assembled for the episodes that I've done about the case of Stephen Avery. But this week on the channel, there will be the Zodiac episode on The Hunt for Zodiac by Mike Rodelli. And also, I would like to give a shout out to Andrew Gray, who sent this in to the email address. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. And he said, "Hey there, I'm doing tech stuff for a true crime podcast called Citizen Detective, which is hosted by Mike Morford, Nama Cates, and Lee Meller. Mike Morford, of course, of ZodiacKillerSite.com and ZodiacKiller.net, as well as behind the podcast Zodiac Speaking. We are streaming this show live every Tuesday, starting on the 14th, and we will also cut each episode into an audio podcast. The cool thing is you can record voice messages for us that we can play on the show and discuss. Thanks." And this is, once again, from Citizen Detective, so please look out for that one in the future on various places to get your podcasts. And speaking of that, there is also a show called Serial Killer Z to A, which has dedicated its first season to the Zodiac Killer. It is indeed a Zodiac Killer channel original production, and you can get that as well anywhere you get your podcasts, including iHeartRadio. And as for this show, Black Box Online Radio, it is available for free downloads at LaunchPad 1. There's a link to that in the description box. You can download the audio version of the program, take it on the go anywhere and anyhow. If you would like to download the video version, you can use YouTube Premium, but that one you have to pay for. LaunchPad 1 is free. And there is always the BuyMeACoffee.com page. There's a link to that in the description box as well. If you'd ever like to make a contribution to help support the channel, anything is welcome, and you will get a shout out on Zodiac Mondays. So to begin with today's topic, I would like to give one more Shout out to Sepper Karimi, who sent this in to the email address, and Sepper and I have been discussing this for a while, but it's related to the 1966 murder of Sherry Joe Bates. Some people believe that the Zodiac killer committed his first murders in December of 1968 at Lake Herman Road with the murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, but some people believe that that is not the case, and there's actually pre-Zodiac activity, which occurred in 1966. On October 30th of that year, Sherry Joe Bates was murdered outside of the RCC library. That's the Riverside City College. What happened to her is still a mystery to this day. But what's interesting about the Bates murder is that after the crime took place, somebody sent in various pieces of writing. There are at least 3 sets of writing that were discovered after Sherry Joe's murder. The first is the Riverside Confession, which was mailed in November of 1966. As I said, Sherry Joe was murdered at the end of October, and the Riverside Confession said, "She was young and beautiful, but now she is battered and dead. Miss Bates was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb. I am stalking your girls now." And then, in December of 1966, there was the discovery of the desktop poem that says, "Sick of living, unwilling to die." That was actually discovered by a custodian, and if I recall correctly, the desk was actually found in storage, as opposed to being out in the open, and the custodian saw the morbid text, and he was very much bothered by it. And, I mean, he did the right thing in all seriousness, because it could have been evidenced in an ongoing murder case, and it's really good that he came forward with that. Then, in the spring of 1967, somebody mailed 3 letters that said Bates had to die, there will be more. In fact, that's what's on 2 of them. The third letter was mailed to Sherry Joe's father, and it said, "She had to die, there will be more." His last name was also Bates, so that's why there was an alteration on that particular letter. But what Sepper and I have been discussing is the final 2 letters of the desktop poem that say R.H. What does that mean? Well, let's read the whole text. The full text of the desktop poem is, "Sick of living, unwilling to die, cut, clean, if red, clean, blood spurting, dripping, spilling, all over her new dress. Oh well, it was red anyway, life draining into an uncertain death. She won't die, this time. Someone'll find her. Just wait till next time. R.H. What do those letters mean, R.H.? There are some theories out there that, number 1, this could be the killer's real initials, because by not signing their name, they thought it would never possibly be traced back to them, and that if they're not going to get caught, they might as well use their real initials. Or some people think that it was a pen name, like, say, for example, lots of writers and poets use a name that isn't their legal name, or the government name, as some people now like to say. But then some people think that it could be a tribute to a particular place, or maybe it's just highlighting a particular place, like Ramona High, which was a high school that was nearby. But what Sepper did was he began to think that it could possibly be paying tribute to not a place, but perhaps a famous poet. And he has identified R.H. Barlow, that somebody could have been not only inspired by the poetry, but even wanted to kind of pretend that they were R.H. Barlow. Like, say, for example, if somebody saw something about fantasy and wizards and elves and it was signed J.R.R., well, maybe then they're paying homage to J.R.R. Tolkien, something down that avenue. And Sepper shared one particular poem with me called Date Uncertain. This is by R.H. Barlow, that says, "The angular green of a mask used in Benin, while black warriors banished from the compound, edge along the night wall, and comets eat the sky. The black-breasted women heard about him. He gestures, they are trees. He postures, they are reeds. Spearing the day of the river, they are violent flowers. On it, or teeth under the water, the soft spider of his brain weaves rapid angles. They are flies. They are the elephant tusk grove, the elephant trunked vine. And he says years, and Johannesburg is cracked. And he says old stones sacred in the valley by the boys, But Christ whipped away like a melon thief or a wife thief, with his blood drooled on the ground, and he says, "Oh, their silly hats, glass, they're women that have never," and there's a dash mark, "the herd shrieks, and a laugh, and a tiger in a grove hesitates, losing a step in his intricate tread." And, that's, there could be a lot of ways we could interpret that particular poem. And other than the part there about blood and, women, I didn't think that it was immediately reminiscent of the desktop poem that was written, "Sick of living, unwilling to die," blood, spurting, spilling. There is a little bit of a connection there in terms of blood, but I wasn't going to dismiss the idea that easily, and I wanted to try and see if there were more poems written by R.H. Barlow that were online, and one of the more famous ones that comes to the top of the search results anyway was called R.E.H. Yes, it's written by R.H. Barlow, but it's just written out R.E.H. And it's actually about Conan the Warrior King. Conan, the Warrior King, lies stricken dead beneath a sky of cryptic stars. The lute, thar was his laughter stilled and sadly mute. Upon the chilling earth his youthful head, there sounds for him no more clamorous fray, but dirges now, where once the trumpet loud. About him press old memories for shroud, and ended is the conflict of the day. Death spilled the blood of him who loved the fight, as men love mistresses and fought it well. His fair young flesh is marble where he fell, with broken sword that vanquished all but night. And as of mythic kings, our words must speak of Conan now, who rose where dreamers seek. So as you see, though, there's definitely not only some type of connection there to blood, but also to stabbing, and Cherry Joe Bates was indeed stabbed to death. But I would also want to share a particular piece of the message that Sepper has written out. Once again, he sent this into the email address, and it says, "I always believed that the desktop poem doesn't have anything to do with the Cherry Joe Bates murder. So I started searching for a while, and I found something interesting. I'm not 100%, but there's a good chance that I might have found the source of the desktop poem. It is from a book called Poems of Compositions, and check out the name of the poet, R.H. Barlow. The digital version doesn't exist, but would you mind saying something on your show? Sorry for my grammar. English isn't my first language." Hey, no, you're doing just fine, Sepper, and I really do appreciate you sharing this with me, because much as the custodian who found the desk would think, it's important to explore almost all possible venues and almost all possible pathways in an unsolved case, because there could be something there. And the interesting thing about the poet R.H. Barlow is I learned that he was a close friend of someone who is a more famous writer. I mean, no offense to R.H., but H.P. Lovecraft. And I really haven't read too much from H.P. Lovecraft. I read The Temple, and again, both these guys just seem like they're very much caught up with morbidity, and I don't think that it's the most outrageous idea in the world that R.H. could be paying homage to a famous writer. What do you think about that? And please feel free to weigh in on some of the other questions. Do you believe the desktop poem was written by the murderer of Cherry Joe Bates? And there are a lot of competing theories about this, because one person who disagrees is Soren Korsgaard, who is the author of America's Jack the Ripper, the definitive account of the Zodiac killer. And Soren's analysis of this is mostly related to linguistics, talking about, in the desktop poem, he says that it says, "She won't die this time, just wait till next time." But Cherry Joe Bates was indeed murdered, and she had already been murdered by the time the desktop poem was discovered. And it also talks about blood spilling all over her red dress, and Cherry Joe Bates was not murdered in a red dress. And then it's also important to remember that Soren does believe the Zodiac wrote the Riverside Confession. The nutshell version of his theory is that the Zodiac did not murder Cherry Joe Bates, but he wrote the Riverside Confession and then did not write the other two pieces of text, the desktop poem and the Bates Had to Die letters. And the reason is, as I said, because of the language that is used. In the Riverside Confession, there are particular words that are misspelled, twitch and squirm, which are then later on used by the Zodiac. So, could this possibly be an example of pre-Zodiac activity? One person who is in a completely different theory is Richard Grinnell of ZodiacCyphers.com, and Richard's take on the subject is that those three pieces of writing were all written by the same person, but he was not the Zodiac killer, and there's a very interesting commonality among them, that they all use the infinitive phrase to die. Bates had to die, sick of living, unwilling to die, whereas the Zodiac killer is not so much about using the word die, but all about kill. The Zodiac is just saying, kill this, kill that. I like killing people because it is so much fun. That's what the Zodiac wrote to begin the 408 cipher. So those things are in strong contradiction. But if you would like to hear more about the ideas of Zodiac researchers like Richard Grinnell and Soren Korsgaard, I invite you to go over to the Zodiac Killer channel and check out the Interview with the Expert series if you haven't heard that yet, where you can hear just countless people sharing their ideas about the Zodiac case, and you can always like and subscribe to that channel as well. Now, to move on to the next segment here, I'm going to talk about a suspect whom I have never mentioned on the channel before because I only recently learned about him, and I am a member of the Facebook group, the Zodiac Killer Library, which is a discussion group for the Zodiac mystery. And somebody simply asked the question, why did the Zodiac killer, this serial killer who operated in the 1960s, give himself the name Zodiac? And somebody, whom I'll simply call Melody, responded by saying, because he saw 5 whirlwinds touch down in an oat field, making a stellar map office of a pentagram, when he was a boy during World War II in Germany. One side of the stellar map is the suspect's sign Gemini, and the other side is Hitler's sign. The suspect Henning Lagies made his own submission online regarding the whirlwinds. And I was like, what? I had absolutely no possible idea of what she was talking about. Some guy saw 5 whirlwinds touch down in a field of oats and Heil Hitler. I was like, goodness gracious, what on earth does that mean? But once she actually clarified what she's trying to say is that she has a Zodiac killer suspect named Henning Lagies, who was a witness to a particular meteorological event. And, I mean, some people become famous and then they go on to become Zodiac killer suspects. And usually it's somebody who is already a known serial killer or suspected serial killer. For example, Robert Christian Hansen, the butcher baker from Alaska, gets also accused of being the Zodiac killer. A more famous example would be Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, also accused of being the Zodiac killer. The Black Dahlia Avenger and the Zodiac killer get accused of being the same person, and everything under the sun and in the darkness, more or less. But Henning Lagies, as you heard, witnessed something that was very odd, where 5 whirlwinds, which I guess would be small tornadoes, touched down in an oat field in Germany. And there is a small article that is written about him on EclipseChasers.com, which Melody did share in that group. And it says, crop circle sky, diagram of 5 crop circles, arranging a geometrical grid consisting of circumscribing pentagrams, produced by Jan Schwalchow and Wolfgang Schindler on the 12th of July 1999. The drawing was made from the estimations in an eyewitness account by Henning Lagies, who claims to have seen these crop circles being formed by a symmetrical group of 5 simultaneous whirlwinds in a field of oats near Weltsprung in Angeln, an area of Schleswig-Holstein in the north of Germany. The event happened on an otherwise windless and clear morning in the summer of 1946, when Henning Lagies was 11 years old. The stellar map, found in Rororo, Lexikon in Neuen Bunden, Hexter, and then it goes on talking about some of the places in Germany, but okay, so these 5 whirlwinds touch down, and it forms a 5-pointed shape, which you can then use to make a pentagram, draw a circle around it, and that becomes a pentacle. Thank you, Seth Rogen. And then it doesn't take too much imagination to see how if you have the circle, you can draw one line going through it, and then one line going through it the other way, and you have the Zodiac side. But Melody's theory is that Henning Loggies moved from Germany after the war to Canada. He actually settled down in British Columbia, and then he went on to become a serial killer in Canada and then committed the Zodiac murders in 1968 and 69. And even though I'm not giving out her last name, Melody says that she has a book in the works, and she has been posting online since 2010. That was the earliest post I found from her about her suspect Henning Loggies. I wasn't able to find a photo of him, but you have been looking at the pentagram that has been created by these whirlwinds. The first point is, I wish that I could have seen that with my own eyes, even if these things are just like small, non-threatening tornadoes that came down and formed crop circles naturally. I mean, I say naturally, maybe it was the aliens. That would also be pretty cool. That would even be more valuable to witness. However, as far as being the Zodiac killer, I wait to hear more about her findings, and I do notice one major discrepancy with what she posted in that rambling piece of text on Facebook. She said that he experienced the event with the meteorological event with the whirlwinds in World War II, but this website here says that was in 1946, so the war should have already been over, and you're always going to wonder about that if people are going to be completely consistent with their narratives. And furthermore, I didn't find anything about Henning Loggies being a suspect in any other crimes. I mean, I didn't look the most thoroughly because I'm waiting for Melody's book to come out, and I'm just curious more about this kind of Zodiac killer German-Canadian connection. Because I was talking about Soren Korsgaard recently, recently I mean like 5 minutes ago, and he's the author of America's Jack the Ripper, and Soren has said very publicly that his theory is that the Zodiac killer was Canadian because of influences of British English. And other people have talked about this, Mike Rodelli, Mark Hewitt, about how there could be certain elements of British English influencing somebody's American English. And you would think that somebody coming from Germany is going to be more exposed to British English because they're in Europe, and then coming to Canada, which is also going to have a few British elements that Soren points out, but the elements of British English they're talking about are using the word shall more frequently, I shall versus I will, saying Happy Christmas instead of Merry Christmas, and even cultural references talking about Gilbert and Sullivan, and like which the Zodiac was obsessing over the Mikado, more or less. So there really is some food for thought there. But as far as the whole British, Canadian, or American connection, if I had to bet my life on it now, I would expect that the Zodiac was American, and I'm not quite sure about all of these theories trying to tie him to another country, but I'm going to approach the stuff with mostly an open mind. I do confess that I have looked at the Zodiac killer German language connection before, because the Zodiac suspect Earl Van Best was rumored, reported, or said to have been fluent in English, German, and Japanese. He was more or less raised trilingual. He was taught German and Japanese by his father, and he bonded with his friend William Lomas because of their connection with the German language. And Earl Van Best was married 3 times. His third wife was Edith Coase, and she was from Austria. And one of these skeptical theories about Earl Van Best being the Zodiac killer is the final Zodiac crime was on October 11th of 1969, and the skeptics say that it's possible that he left the country, and he was actually in Austria at the time of the Stein murder, but the travel records only go back as far as the 1980s, like receipts from the airline companies, and they wouldn't have any records on that they could provide, but they had some evidence and things that they were exploring about his story. But that's the subject of the book, The Most Dangerous Animal of All. I openly ask people not to read that book. I beg you, don't spend your money on it. If you can get it for free, sure. It's not so much don't read the book, it's don't pay your money for that book. I believe Gary Stewart, the author of that one, is an absolute fraud. And there's an excellent documentary that has been made about it on FX that is now available on Hulu. That's where I saw it anyway. And you can also hear an 8-part book discussion about Earl Van Best as the Zodiac Killer, responding to The Most Dangerous Animal of All by Gary Stewart. And I kid thee not, I'm not just trying to puff them up, but everything you will want to know about that book is available in those episodes. And I've also done several standalone things about not only Gary Stewart and Earl Van Best, but I also have an episode on Michael Wachsel, who wrote the companion piece to The Most Dangerous Animal of All. His book was called The End of the Zodiac Killer Mystery, and there's a lot of stuff available online for free. I repeat, Gary Stewart is most likely an absolute liar with his Earl Van Best theory, but that's just my take on the subject. And I was looking for clues in the German language, and I didn't find anything. Japanese? Absolutely. There are all kinds of Japanese clues that could be found here and there, mostly tied to Mikado references, or there's some characters on the Exorcist letter, which was mailed in 1974, that resemble the Japanese language. My personal theory about that one is, I believe that that is purely just imitation Japanese. Someone is trying to kind of mimic the Japanese language, but not write actual Japanese characters, whether it's the kanji or the hiragana. They're just kind of doing a piss-poor attempt. I don't think there's any deeper meaning that has been contained in that message. But if anybody finds any German language clues at all in the Zodiac killer letters or ciphers, you can send them my way, and I'll be curious once Melody's book comes out if she has some more info to share about Henning Loggies. Now, there were several comments that came in from you guys over the course of the last week on the Zodiac Killer News Report, and I would like to go to some of them now. This one comes to us from Hot Rock Nation, who has a comment about the murder of Paul Stein, which took place on October 11th of 1969. Paul Stein was murdered to change the pattern, in my opinion. The papers were probably talking about how the women died and the men survived, and he was targeting couples, so he wanted to switch it up and give them something else to think about. You know, Hot Rock Nation, that is entirely possible, because the Zodiac has murdered David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. Then the second crime was the murder of Darlene Ferrin. The third crime was the stabbing at Lake Berryessa, which saw the murder of Cecilia Shepard. But at Blue Rock Springs, when Darlene Ferrin was murdered, Mike Mageau survived the shooting. At Lake Berryessa, Brian Hartnell survived the stabbing. So the Zodiac has successfully killed a male victim, David Faraday, a teenager who was 17 years old, but he could have done that very simply to prove that he can kill men, or he doesn't simply want to be viewed as a lady killer. He doesn't want to view that this is only about animosity toward women. He wants it to be about fueling his own ego or making himself look tough and badass, and also to confuse people, because everybody's thinking that the Zodiac Killer is going to go after couples or lovers' lanes or people sitting in parked cars in secluded areas. By murdering a taxi driver in Presidio Heights, he had an alternative way of sneaking around, plus this escalated the thrill kill, committing a crime in somewhat of a well-populated area, not just a car that's in the middle of nowhere where people are defenseless. All kinds of people saw the Zodiac Killer leaving Paul Stein's taxi cab. I mean, there are all sorts of witnesses, and that's why we have the composite sketch is of the Zodiac. Those come after the Stein shooting. So there could be several reasons why this person wanted to do that, and I'll share some more of this on the Friday episode. But one person who might agree with you, Hot Rock Nation, about changing up the pattern is Michael Cole, who is the author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy, when he said that this is how the Zodiac was able to evade capture. This is why the Zodiac was never caught. He changed the way he committed crimes. And Michael Cole more or less believes that the Zodiac was someone who didn't operate super frequently, and maybe committing one murder here, and then once every 2 years he's committing a crime, but he changed the way in which he was committing the crimes, not to draw attention to himself or not to leave a pattern that anybody could figure out. Michael Cole believes the first Zodiac crime occurred on June 4th of 1963 with the Domingos Edwards murders, and then the Swindle murders happened in 64. Then the Zodiac changed his pattern in 1966 and murdered Sherry Jo Bates, committing the crimes in a different way so people couldn't put all the pieces together, so they wouldn't be able to connect the dots. And feel free to weigh in the comment section down below. And Hot Rock Nation left a second comment here that says, I think Sherry Jo Bates and Cecilia Shepard were personal. They happen to know each other as well. Betty Lou and Darlene I'm 50-50 on. Could be.
he knew them or had resentment toward girls in a relationship that wasn't with him. I think in some of the cases he followed them in their cars to the murder locations. That's another interesting observation, but as far as Cecilia Shepard and Sherry Jo Bates go, this is perhaps in response to what I said last week on the news report that if a crime is committed by knife, a murder is committed by knife, does it not suggest an intimate connection with the victim, a personal connection? And this was just something that I heard in a movie when a fictional FBI profiler is like, when someone is stabbed to death, that usually means that the killer knew the victim. And there was only one female Zodiac victim that was murdered in 1969 that was stabbed to death, and her name was Cecilia Shepard. And Brian Hartnell was also stabbed, and you have the killer wearing a hood, and it begs the question, why would the killer wear the hood at Lake Berryessa if he didn't want to leave the victims alive and he wanted them to be murdered? And why does it have that particular symbol on it? One possible explanation is because he didn't want to be recognized in the daylight by someone whom he was targeting, whether it's Brian or Cecilia. They'd be like, oh, hey, hey, put it down, let's talk about this, and trying to manipulate him or take advantage of him. But that would have to suggest that they were the only real targets, and then everybody else is committed in a less personal and less connected way. But our next comment comes to us from Aaron Aragon, who says, David Faraday probably drove off Lake Herman Road as an impromptu urge for a little chat of an unknown nature. The little strip of driveway is too exposed to the main road for private intimacy. Is it possible that the Zodiac drove the doomed couple to the side of the road? Faraday and Betty Lou had to see the driver drive up, no surprise. Why didn't David Faraday peel out of there while he could as befuddling? Well, most people think that they were sitting in the car, David's in the driver's seat and Betty Lou is in the passenger seat, and that the second vehicle would have approached, and they're just simply thinking, hey, what's going on? And they had no idea that somebody was going to pull a gun and murder them. The Lake Herman Road murders occurred on December 20th of 1968, and the motive for this really is rather blank, because David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen both did not survive. They were unable to give any witness descriptions, and it really is a crime that is committed possibly just for opportunism, or as some of you guys were saying last week, that the locations were important, but the victims were not pre-selected, so that could possibly tie into that and why it seems rather perplexing. NPC Porky has a comment about the murder of Ray Davis from 1962. Why do people still don't see the many obvious similarities and get on the little differences about the Ray Davis case? Practically all Zodiac confirmed attacks are different on their own. My position is the exact opposite of Michael Cole. Of all the unconfirmed victims, I believe that only Ray Davis is more probable than more probable a Zodiac victim, while I don't believe that the Bates murder was the Zodiac or that the Sweetheart Slayer victims were the Zodiac. And the Sweetheart Slayer victims are Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards, as well as Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle. I hope I read that correctly, because I don't want to misrepresent it. While I don't believe that Bates and the Sweetheart Slayer victims were not victims of the Zodiac, I think that maybe Porky is saying that those are likely Zodiac as well. But yes, the Sweetheart Slayer victims, Domingos Edwards and Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle, and I believe the Sweetheart Slayer was a name that was brought up from the very beginning, and I definitely think that the sheriff named Webster down in Southern California in 1963 was involved with that, but I forget if he was the first one to use that term or not. Well then, if you think that the murder of Ray Davis had to have been committed by the Zodiac Killer, how do you respond to Dr. David Gold's wonderful challenges that, number one, the call in the Ray Davis case also came before the crime was committed. Somebody called and said, I'm going to pull something real nasty in Oceanside and you'll never figure it out. The Zodiac of 1968 and 69 did no such activities to the best of our knowledge. Also, the body of Ray Davis was dumped at a particular location, the Zodiac did not relocate the bodies of any of the confirmed victims in 1968 or 69. So there are some differences, but it is a pretty good observation all the same. We have a comment that has come in here from Ray Grant, who is the author of Zodiac Killer Solved as well as Zodiac Killer Dreams, and he says something about using forensic genealogy to solve the Zodiac Killer mystery. Ray Grant writes, "Here's another aspect of DNA that posters on Zodiac Killer message boards never think about. The brick wall of forensic genealogy. Let's assume that my dad, who was an accountant, had an affair with one of his secretaries at the company back in the early 1940s, and he accidentally impregnated her. Since she was married, she either didn't tell her husband or was unaware that the child was my father's. The kid grows up to be the Zodiac Killer. By the time law enforcement begins to use forensic genealogy to track down the killers in 2010, both the Zodiac's parents are dead. There's nothing to link them because the company either doesn't exist or purged its records during the computerization in the 1980s. So when law enforcement uses Zodiac DNA to create a family tree, it arrives at my nuclear family with 5 male siblings. They check the garbage of Jerry, Jim, Ray, John, and Joe, and they discover that the DNA belongs to a half-sibling of mine, and that I am a half-sibling of the Zodiac Killer. But my own parents were only married once, so there's no branch that leads to the Zodiac's identity. And that's just one example. There are also adoptions, gaps in the official records, which would stop a trace in its tracks. Genetic genealogy isn't foolproof." Absolutely. Thank you so much to Ray Grant for that comment. And that is just another problem, though, that people would experience investigating the Zodiac Killer mystery. But Ray Grant, I think, was either the first person to discover this, or definitely the first person that I learned about this from, that the Zodiac has a connection to the number pi, 3.14, and the numbers continue to go on, and it relates to the alphanumeric value of pi, because that question that I was talking about where Melody responded to with her theory on Hennig Lagis was, why did the Zodiac Killer use that name? Well, with pi, the third letter of the alphabet is what? C, right? What's the first letter? A. The fourth letter, D. 314. 3.14. And then I is the ninth letter, O is the 15th letter, and then Z, of course, is 26. So you have the letters of the word Zodiac relate their alphanumeric value to the number pi, or the first several digits of it anyway. There's a Zodiac suspect out there named Richard Gaikowski, though, that had a birthday on March 14th, 3.14. And we can just put that up with some of the other coincidences surrounding the suspicions involving Richard Gaikowski in the Zodiac case. I mean, there's a solution to the Z13 cipher, which connects him to all of this. There are also the car door at Lake Berryessa, where the Zodiac wrote out the dates of activity, and on the day the Lake Berryessa stabbing occurred, you can add up the numbers and you'll get 33, Gaikowski's age at the time. There are all types of coincidences that point toward Gaik as the Zodiac, but then there's another mountain of evidence that is going against him being the Zodiac Killer. And Ray Grant just pointed out that even if they obtain the Zodiac's DNA, they might not even be able to do some type of forensic genealogy, and I'm really not certain. And Ray Grant was also talking about the likelihood of obtaining DNA from the outside of a Zodiac envelope that was not saliva DNA, and how it could be very unlikely because it's exposed to all sorts of possibilities for contamination during the mailing process. But I thank everyone for their comments here. And at this time, I would like to give a shout out to Bruce, who uses the YouTube name BH, for sending me some things here that are actually more or less collectible matchbooks that have the name Zodiac on them. And if you look here, though, you'll see that not only do they use the name Zodiac in the names of these businesses, but they also have more or less Zodiac signs. Some of them even have complete astrological designs. I found that the one that seems to have the strongest possibility of some type of Zodiac connection would be the one that says the Marcus Daily Restaurant and talks about the Zodiac Room because even if you get online and you look up this particular restaurant and the collectible matchbook, it says that it's a 1940s style design. So could that have been an influence on the reason why the name Zodiac was chosen? The one that contains the complete astrological signs, and perhaps the most intricate of these designs, is called simply the Zodiac, but it was located in St. Louis, Missouri. I went through some of these earlier. I think as I said, the Zodiac room may have the strongest possibility of some relation, but I think that these are very, very significant on just how prevalent and frequently used the term Zodiac is. It's going to be found on watches, the Ford Zodiac is going to be found on business names, not to mention the circle with the cross going through it, because even as we see on the one that says the Zodiac cocktail bar, there is a circle with a cross going through it, but it's also turned the Zodiac sign into a compass saying north, south, east, or west, you will find our spot the best. So that is not simply just a circle with some lines in it, it is also a compass. And I really think that this goes to show you that this isn't the most outrageous and intricately thought out plot in the world for somebody to give themselves the name Zodiac. It could have come from the Zodiac watches, or it could have come from any type of place that somebody's walking by. Maybe they lived across the street from one of these Zodiac bars and clubs when they were growing up. I mean, anything is possible in an unsolved case. So I'm definitely going to pay attention to some things like that, because you'd really have to expect that somebody didn't just make this up out of nowhere. Not to mention the film Charlie Chan at Treasure Island, which talks about the villain named Zodiac or Dr. Zodiac, whatever it was. But one of my own original theories is that the Zodiac first chose the letter Z in 1966 or later. As I said, I don't believe the Zodiac killer murdered Sherry Jo Bates. I don't believe the Zodiac wrote any of those pieces of writing. But I think that the Zodiac killer was very familiar with the Riverside murder of Sherry Jo Bates, and the letters that are mailed say Bates had to die, there will be more, signed with a Z, or what looks like to be a Z with the kind of squiggly little Q-top. So there's also an article and a story that was published in Detective Story magazine back in 1921 that featured a character named Z that says, "This is Z speaking." So I think the letter Z was chosen first, and sometime after 1966, the person who wrote the Zodiac letters was just looking for a suitable word or something connected in his brain one day, Z plus Zodiac, and that's how the Zodiac killer was created. That all of those elements in the past, kind of like a snowball effect, creating some type of serial killer named Z, but then, the term Zodiac also sounded just a little bit badass. That was my absolute gut instinct when I was a kid. I thought that the person who chose the name Zodiac just did it because it sounded tough, or it sounded somewhat mysterious. It sounds strong in some ways. The thing I used to say on the channel is, what's the guy going to call himself? The astrologer? This is the astrologer speaking. I'm responsible for the 2 deaths at Lake Herman Road. That definitely doesn't sound very tough or badass or strong. So I think that that is perhaps one of the more likely possibilities out there. But in terms of the channel, as I said, this Friday I will be doing a Zodiac episode based on the book The Hunt for Zodiac by Mike Rodelli, and I would just like to look at a few comments that you guys gave about the murder of Teresa Halbach and the stories that have been shared on Making a Murderer, the Netflix series. And Teresa Halbach was murdered in 2005, and we have a comment that is from Tom Jim that says, "I've watched and read info, both for and against Stephen Avery being responsible for the murder of Teresa Halbach, and not that my opinion matters, but I think Stephen Avery at least had something to do with Teresa's murder and disposal of her body, but I also believe there was police misconduct, which is worse because if a true killer should be freed because of planted evidence by the police and not affording him a fair trial, they screwed up the case no matter what, no matter how you look at it. Thanks for covering Teresa Halbach's death. It's sad how sometimes the true crime victims get forgotten or treated like evidence and the suspects become folk heroes. Keep up the good work." Hey, Tom Jim, thank you so much. Yes, because on the Netflix series Making a Murderer, they mostly are leaning toward the fact that this guy named Stephen Avery was wrongfully convicted for a crime in 2003. He was then let out of prison because DNA exonerated him. And the theory of the police and law enforcement is 2 years later, in 2005, he committed the murder of Teresa Halbach, who was a photographer, and that he was guilty of that crime, so then he was sent back to prison. Even the whole question is, did he actually do it? And it could be that he was absolutely framed by the authorities, and it could also be that he did not. But I think what Tom Jim is arguing here is that no matter what, they botched the case. Something seems mishandled, and if any type of evidence is mishandled, or if any type of evidence is planted, then someone should be exonerated because, as Tom said, you have the right to a fair trial. And if someone is tampering with the evidence, then you don't have a right to a fair trial. Someone who thinks that Stephen Avery is guilty of the murder of Teresa Halbach is 1212 Matt, who says he tortured animals for sheer pleasure. That speaks volumes of Stephen Avery's guilt or innocence. Okay, 1212 Matt, I know where you're coming from about how someone who tortured animals is more likely to commit violent actions in their adulthood, but that speaks volumes about his guilt or innocence? No, it doesn't. Just because somebody has done something in the past, it doesn't mean they did something in 2005. It doesn't mean that he committed that exact crime. Oh, I completely follow what you're saying, that suggests that he would have had homicidal tendencies. However, that doesn't mean at all that he committed the murder of Teresa Halbach. Like, let's say, for example, we have somebody who was guilty of one particular crime. It doesn't mean that he was also the Zodiac killer. Sorry to tell half of the human race, but that's just simply not the case. I don't know, maybe some guy saw 5 tornadoes in Germany in 1946. Something suspicious about that guy. There wasn't a single breeze going on that night. How on earth did this happen? Maybe he's the Zodiac killer. I don't know, but I definitely cannot wait to find out all the details of that story. And the final comment that came in on the most recent episode, The Murder of Teresa Halbach, was from Akhtar Ali, who says, he is innocent, it is all a setup. Well, that's what the show is more or less arguing, and there's some books out there, such as Wrecking Crew by John Farrock, as well as Illusion of Justice by Jerry Buting, which talk about all the ways in which blood could have been planted, and evidence from Teresa Halbach could have been placed into Stephen Avery's home, most notably her car key. And, I mean, it looks pretty damning if, you didn't know anything about Stephen Avery. Teresa Halbach is murdered. Her bone remains are found burned on his property. Her car is found on his property. The key to her car is found in his bedroom, and there's his blood in her car. So he's either the best liar in the world and the most dangerous person who has ever walked in the state of Wisconsin, or this was all planted by people trying to frame him and make him look guilty. And there could be motives for this. That could be pressuring people into admitting to things that didn't actually happen. It really is quite shocking. But as for now, I would like to turn it over to you guys, and I just wanted to share some of these very insightful comments about Making a Murderer and the story of Stephen Avery and the murder of Teresa Halbach. And you can always feel free to visit some of the playlists here on this channel, such as the Zodiac Killer News Report playlist, the Making a Murderer playlist, and there are now more than 1,000 episodes of Black Box Online Radio, so I invite you to check out all the things about the true crime cases, as well as any subject under the sun or in the darkness here. And lastly, I would like to get to the shout-out for BuyMeACoffee.com. If anybody makes a contribution, they will get a shout-out on Zodiac Mondays. And this one is for Floyd Black 53, who says, it was an update in the market. Yes, the stock market has been absolutely out of control over the past 4 or 5 months, and all of you investors out there probably don't need to hear that from me, but some of us took a real beating, such as myself. Big thank you to Floyd Black 53, and let's hope that some of those things smooth over, the global crises around the world, that is. And that will be all from me now. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. And I will see you over there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.